Happy, happy day. I feel like I'm alive. Do I look like I'm alive? I'm alive. Happiness. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday version of the Mike Meyers Ask Mike Anything live stream. However, the poet Dante's Guide. Dave Rush, you say weird things sometimes, brother. But we love you anyway. All right, so welcome aboard, guys. Today is going to be an interesting day. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion of using virtual machines to understand networking. In my opinion, you could pretty much teach yourself everything you need to get through a Network Plus course, CompTIA Network Plus, basic Cisco course, maybe, probably. Just using virtual machines. Now, when I say virtual machines, I need to be very careful here. I'm not necessarily talking about virtual machines per se. I'm talking about the virtual networks, which most of the popular hypervisors out there allow us to use. It's a very interesting way to do all this. And the biggest and best part about all this is that it's all free. So we've had a couple of episodes already where we've conceptualized the idea of hypervisors. And you have to understand virtual machines anyway for CompTIA's A+, Net+, to a lesser degree Security Plus. So, I mean, you're going to be in VMs anyway. We've taken a few episodes to discover what VM we like the best. I'm currently a big fan of Oracle's VirtualBox, although I'm certainly not against VMware Player or Hyper-V. They're fine as well. In fact, what we're going to be doing through this entire series could be done with any of these hypervisors. I'm doing it in VirtualBox. So you're welcome to ask me questions, but only if you're doing all this in VirtualBox. If you decide to take the Hyper-V route or something like that, well, God bless you. But not quite sure where it goes. Hey, DQ, haven't seen you for a while. How's it going, man? Zerxix, good to see you too, brother. Virgil. Andre, of course. Patricia, of course. And Tullwood, of course. My holy triumvirate. So anyway, what I want to do today is we're going to talk about one of the trickier parts to all this, which is unfortunately installing a virtual router. So we've got two things I want to cover. Number one, we're going to talk about creating a virtual machine today and putting a router in it, okay? And then the second thing we're going to be talking about is something I've already harped on before, but I'm going to hit on it again and again, and that is you really, before you try to do anything in a virtualized network, you have got to write down everything that you're doing. You have to make those rounded rectangles for every network ID, for every broadcast domain. However you want to work this stuff out, diagrams have to be made. I don't care how good you are at this. Diagrams have to be made, or you're going to mess up. If you're more into the Cisco thing, you can use Cisco icons. Completely up to you. But we're going to have to do two of those things. So I want to jump into both of these. So one of the things I do, I should have had this up already, is the software router we're going to be using is called OpnSense. OpnSense is great. It's been around for a while. Get in there. It's completely free. It's really sold more as a network security tool, but it's actually a full-blown, absolutely wonderful router. And it's completely free, so hard to beat that out. So what I need you to do is download, if you haven't already, a copy of OpnSense. I'm using 23 point something. So what you want to do is AM64, where it says VGA, change that to DVD. What we need to do is download an ISO image. Once we download an ISO image, VirtualBox, in fact, all the different virtualization hypervisors can treat that and install OpnSense like an operating system, okay? So we will go ahead and set up a virtual machine. And then once the virtual machine's set up, well, I guess we'll download the ISO first, install the virtual machine, and get that up and running. And once that's up and running, that's basically all I want to do today because it's fairly complicated. And there's a couple of very tricky steps in here. In fact, this is the only really tricky thing you're going to run into in this entire series, is the actual installation of OpnSense. Now, once OpnSense is installed and I've got one copy, I can just clone that. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about virtual machines. I can just say, take this virtual machine, make me another copy of it, and then I can use it for something else. In fact, that's something pretty commonly done when you're playing with virtual machines a lot, especially if you're using something like VirtualBox or VMware that allows you to make clones. You go ahead and make a virtual machine, okay? So let's say you install Ubuntu into a VM. So you take that copy and you never mess with it. That's like your perfect copy. So if you want to start doing something, you take that virtual machine, you make a copy or a clone or whatever the terminology is for the virtual, for the hypervisor you use, and then that's what you mess with. So we're going to be kind of doing the same thing here with OpnSense. So let's go ahead and finish up this installation, and then we'll talk about what to do next. All right, so AMD 64, DVD, and then go ahead and download it. Now, I've downloaded it already. I need to warn you, it's going to be in BZ compression format. So that means you're going to have to uncompress it using whatever compression software you might use. I don't even know what I'm using anymore. I think I use wonderful old 7-zip, which can uncompress just about anything. But I even think the default Windows tools are in there. Anyway, so you download this thing. It's going to have a file extension of BZ. You got to uncompress it and take that ISO. I just dumped the ISO on my desktop. That may not be a good idea for a lot of people because they like to be more organized than Mike Meyers. So they have their little ISO folder. Completely up to you. Bottom line is we downloaded a copy of OpnSense. And be careful, guys. It's not OPEN. It's OPN. That will be important. So what we're going to try right now is we're going to actually attempt an installation. It's a little persnickety in a few spots. And if it doesn't work, it's no big deal because here in the live version, the only people who are actually going to see this, and we'll edit out the pops and skips, and I've got pre-installed versions ready to rock and roll. But I do want you guys to see some of the challenges. All right, so let's go ahead and start this process. Hopefully you do have a copy of VirtualBox, and you can follow the bouncing mic as we go along here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to call it OPN SENSE3. You can guess why. So OpnSense 3, you could type in Timmy the Wonder Pool here, folks. It doesn't matter. So OpnSense 3, and then the ISO image, which I've downloaded and thrown on my desktop. It's actually sitting right here. So I've put that in there. Now when it says type, this is actually based on BSD. So I'm going to go to OpenBSD 64-bit. I tried it with FreeBSD 64-bit. It worked fine, but you know, I'm going to do OpenBSD 64-bit. Trust me, folks, there's enough other places in this setup where things can go wrong. Don't add complexity by doing something different than what Mike's doing. All right, so we'll hit next. Base memory, this is way too low. You want to get to about 4 gig. So 4 gig's kind of a magic number there. I'm going to hit next. Drive size at 16 is a little low. I'm going to take it to 30. And it goes ahead and begins the installation, so we hit finish. All right, now, here's the important point. Folks, it's a router, okay? Routers have more than one NIC in them by definition. Because if a router only has one NIC, then it's only routing one IP. Okay, router on a stick, but don't get me started. So a traditional router is going to have at least 2 NICs in it. So one of the things we absolutely have to do is configure 2 network cards. So let me show you how to do that. All right, so we're going to go under settings. Here we can see we're on OpnSense 3, and I'm going to go down to network. And right now it says enable network adapter. I always put it to the bridged adapter because this actual host machine is on a network. And then I'm going to go to adapter 2, and believe it or not, I'm going to set this one to bridged adapter as well. Now you'd say, well, wait a minute, Mike. If you set up this router with 2 ports and they're both connected to the same network, isn't that going to cause problems? Actually, no, but it's because of the way OpnSense configures itself. With OpnSense, it will work very, very hard to take one of the network cards and call it the WAN connection. And it will take the other connection and try very hard to make it a LAN connection. By default, OpnSense basically tries very hard to configure itself as a home router. It works real hard to do that. Now there's other ways you can do this, but this is one way that I know works. And yes, when I initially get the router installed, it's not going to make sense because they're going to have both sides of the router connected to the same network, but I'm going to go into a configuration screen and correct that. So it's not that hard to do. So we're going to go ahead, let me hit OK here. And let's take a look for a minute. And actually, I want to show you this process a little bit because it's not super intuitive. So let me show you guys this. So here's my host computer, the one I'm on right now. And it's on a little network. Here's my little AT&T router hooked up to the internet. And the AT&T router is passing out 172. The AT&T router itself on the LAN side, this is my real router, people, okay? It's got 172.18.13.1. It is that way because I configured it that way because I like to use something other than 192.168. That's Mike Meyers, popular author. All right, so it's everything in my network is going to be 172.18.13 on a WAC 24. And this thing's a DHCP server. So my little studio machine, the one you're actually watching me run from here, has an IP address of 172.18.13 dot something. I think it's 110. It's not important. We can check that as we go. So this is my current setup. This is how I'm talking to you on the internet. So what I want to do here is I'm going to move my actual host system itself kind of out of there. I mean, technically it is still part of the 172.18.13 network, but I'm going to set up a virtual network. In this case, it's going to be a private network, and I'm going to call it Network 1, and I want it to do 192.168.1s on a WAC 24. So that we could have set up, and so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to make a new virtual machine using OpnSense. This virtual machine is going to be a 2-NIC router. At first, we're going to play with it a lot more. We want to get this up and running. So on one side, what we're going to call the WAN side, it's going to be a DHCP client. And it's actually going to be grabbing an IP address from my AT&T router. So it's going to get an address like 172.18.13 dot something. I don't know what the last digits are going to be. And then on the LAN side, I'm going to set it up so that its IP address is 192.168.1.1. And it's going to be passing, it's going to be a DHCP server. So anything I put in there, like I've got a Windows system, a virtual machine, that I'm going to drop into that Network 1 along with my router. And I'm going to use that as my initial setup. I'm going to ping, get everything up and running before I do anything else. So that drawing that you just saw, you should be drawing that drawing. It should be in front of you. Because what's going to happen is once we start getting all this stuff configured, we're going to be going through 3 different computers. The host itself, right? This Windows system that I'm going to be dropping into the Network 1, and then the OpnSense router. So I've got 3 machines. I got the actual host machine itself, plus 2 machines, and I'm going to be bouncing back and forth like a crazy man. It's easy to get confused. Use a pen and paper, folks. It is your friend. All right, so before we go any deeper, I want to get some terminology in here. Number one, because it's BSD based, the first router port is going to be called EM0, then EM1, EM2, EM3. We only have 2, so it's going to be EM0 and EM1. The OpnSense configuration wants to call this WAN, and we're going to set it up as a DHCP client, which is done by default. And so it's going to get a 172.18.13 address. The other port is going to be called EM1. Folks, I didn't invent these terms. These are BSD terms, all right? If we were to install a 3rd network card in this router, it would be EM2. So the OpnSense calls it LAN, and then it will actually get the address of 192.168.1.1. Understand that on the LAN side, so on this router, One side is going to be a DHCP client, which is how your home router works. It gets an IP address from your ISP, Xfinity or Frontier or whatever you use. But on that same router, on the LAN side, it's going to be a DHCP server. And it's going to be passing out, in this particular example, 192.168.1s. Folks, this is one of the beautiful things about OpnSense as a virtualized router. Its initial setup, it fights like the dickens to become just basically a home router. It's going to have NAT built in. It's going to have DHCP client. It's going to have DHCP server. By default, it sets all this up. It's going to have a pretty nice firewall pre-configured, so we're not going to be able to ping from the WAN side by default. But it's a good enough start. And the other nice thing that I like about OpnSense is that while you can do everything from the command line, OpnSense comes with a pretty nice web configuration. And once you get the initial setup running, then the rest of it's pretty easy, because from there on in, we'll have a nice core router that we can just make a copy of and do 18,000 different things to it, and it's always going to work. Having said that, this is going to be kind of the interesting part, because a lot of this is a little bit persnickety, and it is so persnickety that I think it's worth going through an actual installation just so you don't have to go through the pain that I have. The other thing I need to warn you about is I'm using OpnSense version, I don't want to lie here, OpnSense 23.1. I can tell you that OpnSense is a very supported bit of software, and they're not afraid to change things when they think they can make it better. And you can go through like the last 5 versions, and just the installation alone is dramatically different. With that all put in, let's go ahead and take a look at everything and get ready to start the installation. So I'm going back. There's OpnSense. Let's get back so you can see. All right, so here I am. Here's OpnSense 3. Where'd it go? There we go, right at the bottom. All right, here's OpnSense 3. There's a couple of settings I want to be really sure about. On the display side, where it says video memory, go ahead and push that to 128 megabytes. It just allows for some higher reses that you may not be able to do without that. You may not even care, because really the actual device itself is pretty much in a command line, and it's just within the GUI is where we make those types of changes. On storage, we've got plenty of storage. We've already covered that. And then on the network, make sure that both of these adapters are enabled. You don't need adapter 3 or 4. Later when we get into more complex routing situations, sure, we'll add more NICs. But right now, 2 is plenty. So everything looks good. Let me go under storage, triple check, and I'm going in right here to make sure that the ISO that I downloaded is there. That's the one thing I've never been a big fan about VirtualBox, is that if you want to install an ISO, you have to go into storage, click this little thing, go into storage, click on the CD-ROM, and then hit that, and then plug that in. This is also where you remove it if you want to. Let's put that back in, otherwise it's going to be very sad. And I think we're okay. Fingers crossed. Let's start it and see what happens. The biggest thing I can tell you about installing OpnSense is don't press any buttons unless it really makes you do it. OpnSense is notorious during the installation phase. For the record, the installation is completely command line. It'll sit there and stall, and you're thinking, oh, I got to type something. And the answer is leave it alone, and you're almost always right. Let's go ahead and get back in here. See if I can make this nice and big so you guys can see it. I'm just getting to a scaled mode so it can see more. You'll notice at this point, guys, I haven't even bothered looking at what it's saying. I'm just typing away. I'm not typing anything. Yeah. So now it's looking for the network cards. There's one big stall right about here. Pretty sure it's right here. And this is one of these points where you start saying to yourself, did I do this right? have I followed all the steps that Mike Meyers said? The answer is you're almost certainly right. While we're talking about it, the default username, the root username is root, and the password is OpnSense, O-P-N. There is no E. Boy, did I learn that one the hard way. O-P-N-S-E-N-S-E. Okay, there's 2 E's, there's not 3 E's. So be careful with that. All right, here we are. All right, so right now, if I just type in as root and I type in the password OpnSense, it's going to put me into a live CD mode, which might be something you'd be interested in. However, I'm not. So right now you can see by default, it's done some pretty good configuration. You see that? By default, these are actually backwards. I'm going to have to remember that. I like EM0 to be the WAN and EM1 to be the LAN. It doesn't really matter, but it's going to be important for us to remember that here a little bit later. But for right now, we're okay. I want to actually install it. So what we type here is installer, I-N-S-T-A-L-L-E-R. And the password is OpnSense, O-P-N-C-N-S-E. All right, it's going to go and do an installation keyboard. It uses UFS file system by default. Install it in the virtual drive that I set up. See the 30 gig drive? And you want to swap partition of 8 on there? Sure. You sure you want to wipe out that hard drive? Yes, I am. And the installation begins. Now, you'll be surprised that it's not that terribly slow. Well, given the fact, I mean, we're running almost all of this. We're running all of this on solid state drives. So that's definitely going to speed it up a little bit. But we're going to have to go through the installation. The tricky part here is that once it's installed, you have a very specific place where you have to unhook the CD-ROM out of the virtual machine. Otherwise, it gets kind of crabby. So we're going to be watching for that when it comes up here in just a moment. I'm also going to tell you is that if you decide to go ahead and install OpnSense as a virtual machine, you're going to mess it up a few times, folks. Don't panic. Just keep trying and you're in good shape. Okay, here we go. So this is the point where I want to be. So it's done an installation, so I'm going to change the root password to good old total, T-O-T-A-L. All right. And here's where I have to be patient because you're like, okay, am I supposed to be doing something right now? And the answer is no, just leave it alone. So what will happen is it's going to go ahead and complete the install, exit and reboot. There we go. So it's going to go through the installation process and it's going to actually show some of the stuff we already saw because the optical media, that ISO file is still there. And there's probably better ways to uninstall it, but I've never found it. So what I do instead is I literally let that installation go again, but it's going to come up to a screen where I can actually say, shut her down. And when I shut her down, that's when I'm going to pull the optical media out of the virtual machine. And that seems to be the best way to do it. So there's a couple of screens here. You know, you see stuff like press any key to start the configuration importer. Just don't press any keys. I'm not pressing any buttons here, folks. I love IRQ9. That's so much fun. All right, so it's starting to get into a little bit of a crabby mode here. We're going to, again, I'm ignoring all this. And you're like, well, Mike, didn't we do this already? Yeah, we did, but it's booting off the ISO a second time. And despite my multiple attempts to come up with an easier way to do this, this is what I've discovered is the best way at this point in time to be able to actually take that optical media out without everything blowing up. Okay, so here it is. So this is the point, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in root, and watch this. If I type in total, which remember I changed the password to, the login's incorrect. That's because it's booting one more time off the optical media. So O-P-N-S-E-N-S-E. So that gets me in here, and now I can actually press number 5, power off system. Do I want to proceed? Yes, I do. I can't tell you how much pain and suffering I had to go through to get this step figured out. I'm sure there's other places you can go in during the installation of OpnSense and not cause it to absolutely have a cow. But I'll tell you, man, I tried taking that optical media out in about 18 different places and it never worked. Okay, so we're shut down. So I'm going to go into my settings now, finally. I'm going to go into storage, go here, and I'm going to remove the disk. If I've done this right, it's not going to boot off the optical disk because I literally just removed it. There is no ISO. So I'm going to boot it up one more time, cross our fingers, and let's see if I've got my initial configuration correct. Yeah, again, guys, don't worry. If this thing blows up, I actually have... All right, it seems to be booting up fine. I actually have a backup copy just in case. I've done this many, many times in a row, and every time I make a mistake, I've been able to pretty much figure out my mistake every time, but not every single time, so I get a little bit paranoid. So everything looks like it's coming up, coming up, coming up, coming up. All right, so I'm going to do root, and if I've got it right this time, the password total should be working. Outstanding. All right, so we're up and cooking. So what we have here, folks, are two ports. Look at the screen one more time. They do a good job. EM0, which is currently set up as LAN. I would have preferred EM0 to be WAN. It doesn't really make any difference. It's just I've been setting it up one way or the other. So the LAN is 192.168.1.1. That's what OpnSense does by default. That's how I knew that. WAN side, which is a DHCP client, pulled a 172.18.13.131 address. So I should be in good shape. In order to get the configuration just the way I want it, I've got to get to, well, I can do this all through command line, but I'm just not that good at OpnSense. But OpnSense has a wonderful web-based configuration. The trick is I've got a basic setup. I can't access this, or I shouldn't be able to access this through the WAN side because it sets up a firewall, a good firewall too, by the way. But I should be able to get to it from the LAN side. The trick is, right now, is I'm going to have to, in order to get to that, I'm going to have to go to my Windows virtual machine. And I'm going to put Windows virtual machine and the OpnSense on the same network one. Got it? So let's go through that process. So I take a look at OpnSense, I go over to settings, I go over to network, and right now, adapter 2 is bridge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send that to an internal network, and I'm going to call this internal network network 1. Do you understand what I just did? One of the ports is on my bridge network, and the other one is now in this virtualized private network, internal network. So what I got to do now is head over to my Windows system. Is that even still running? Yeah, it's still running, and I'm going to turn that onto the internal network. So here's my Windows 10 system, which is running, and I'm going to go over to settings, go to network, adapter 1, well, that's the only, there is no other adapter on this thing. Adapter 1, it's bridged. We're going to send that to internal network, and it's going to go to network 1. People are asking me, they're like, Mike, where did network 1 come from? Because I typed it in. That's all I did. The first time I set up this router on the private network, let me use the proper terminology here. On the internal network, they had the default, what they call INET. I don't even really know what that is. And so I typed in capital NETWORK1, bonk. And that's how network 1 magically appeared. I literally just made a broadcast domain by doing that. So then I go into my router. I set the router up on that network 1 internal network. I set up my Windows system. They should be on the same network. So let's see what happens. Oh, the other nice part I might add, please remember that when I set up OpnSense, not only is the LAN side 192.168.1.1, but it's also a DHCP server. So in theory, I can go over to that Windows virtual machine right now, do an IP config renew, heck, it might already be there, and see if I get a 192.168.1 IP address. Let's see what happens. Okay, Windows system, still there, good. All right, so if this thing bounces right into the internet, I'll be like surprised. Okay, I didn't think, no, it shouldn't be on the internet yet. All right, so what I want to do here is, let's see what my IP address is. All right, so right now, this should be set to DHCP. It is DHCP, okay, cool. All right, so in theory, we should have a network connection. It doesn't mean I have an internet connection, folks. It just means I have a network connection. So what you can see I was practicing earlier. So I'm gonna do, let's get into PowerShell real quick, do an IP config, spell it right. All right. And I'm getting to 169.254. Okay. 169.254 simply is telling me that my computer is configured for DHCP, but it can't find a DHCP server. So I'm going to do an IP config renew. Keep my fingers crossed. And here's the thing that's actually tricky about this. Most of the configuration issues you're going to be running into with OpnSense is this basic stuff. It's rarely going to be the more complicated issues, you know, like later when we're going to be setting up, you know, RIP routers or something like that. Everybody's going to be like, oh, where are all the problems? Usually the problem is, you know, something went wrong with the IP information or something like that. I have the crazy feeling somebody's trying to talk to me right now. Give me a sec. All right, everybody seems to be okay, at least for the moment. I'm happy with that. All right, so we're getting a little bit of a stall here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to be checking, I'm going to go back over to my OpnSense. EM1 is up. This is always the fun part, kids. This is the part I get to delete when we edit this one out. So I'm just going to do a quick double check of everything here, make sure I'm set up the right way. OpnSense settings. It's the network that has me the most worried. All right, so we could actually do a little experimenting here. Number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to ping that Windows system. See if he's got a real IP address yet. He really doesn't see it. I'm sitting on a 169.254. All right, so we can actually cheat here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come in from the other side. Oops, I want to see all the streaming information we're doing here. So what I'm going to try to do is come in from the other side. And I don't even have a WAN address now. What happened? All right, well, we got a better thing we can do. I'm going to power off the system. And what we're going to do is bring up one of my other ones that's configured basically identically. The only thing that's interesting to me right here is it swapped the EM0s and EM1s. I did this 12 times in a row, folks. 12 times in a row. So what I'm going to do is just come over here. I've got a pre-made OpnSense that I literally made like 30 minutes ago, so it's not like I'm just inventing all this. I'm going to let this puppy fire up. In fact, I'm even in more, because I have two OpnSenses, I forget which one is my ready to go backup. So one of these two is going to work. Don't touch any keys. Don't touch any keys. I have a feeling that OpnSense 2 backup is not the right one. It's OpnSense 1, but you know, I'm already here, man. We got to try this. Such a temptation to press buttons about 800 different places here, folks. Don't do it. This big stall at this point tells me I'm pretty sure I've got the right one here. And for the record, I've tried a number of different software routers, and this is the best one. It's the least fussy of all the ones that I played with that at least has all the features I'm looking for. So that is why I'm putting up with a few of these little issues with OpnSense. It's worth it. You want to be careful. I also, like, you're going to try this on your own, and when you get onto YouTube or whatever, a lot of the how to do this, like how to install OpnSense in VirtualBox, are badly dated. Okay, we're up and cooking. So. All right, so I'm going to kill this one too. Must be OpnSense 1. Sorry, guys. I knew it because it didn't take my proper password. It took the default password. Just going to let this shut down all the way. All right. Here's OpnSense 1. I'm going to double check all my settings here real quick because I don't want to do this again. That is empty. Network is configured. 2.1. Okay, everything looks good there. Let's try this one more time. Yeah, the other thing you might want to consider backing up is remembering which versions of things you do. God, I'm bad about that. I've always been bad about that. Again, guys, when you come back after we do this live, next time we come back, I will have this edited so it'll go a lot faster. I just couldn't come up with a way to not show you this. View, scaled mode. I love scaled mode. All right, we're back to a login. Okay. The WAN side on EM0 has a 172. The LAN, everything's looking good. Gonna log in. Root with the pop survey says, happiness and joy is mine. Yay! All right. So I've got this OpnSense system. on one side, in network 1, it's got an IP address of 192.168.1.1, okay? And that's the web interface I want to get to. I've already set up that Windows virtual machine to be in network 1. So this time, let's go back into that Windows machine, do an IP config, see if it's got a 192.168.1. something address. Heck, we can ping it if we're necessary, everything. So let's see this work. Otherwise, we're going to go to interpretive dance. All right, so, oh, look, it found it. Here's the Windows network. You can see it just found a new network, so that makes me happy. And let me do an IP config. Yay, okay, so it's got 192.168.1.102. So that's telling me that this Windows system, which is on the internal network 1, is in the same network as the LAN side of my OpnSense router. So let's give this another whirl. I'm going to take this down. It's got a web interface, so just open up a web browser. 192.168.1.1. Fingers crossed. Oh, dumb. I want you guys to notice something, though. Did you guys notice that even my little Windows system is on the internet? The Windows system is on the internet because the OpnSense router is working exactly the way it should. So I'm actually getting a little bit of an answer, but let's get into the router itself. Okay, so this is the first thing you're going to see. This is important. You see, you get this certificate error. It's because the certificate that comes with the OpnSense router is self-signed, so you're always going to get this error. So just go onto the web page. Every browser has a different way to do that. ROT. Whew, there we are. This is where you're going to get most of the work done working with OpnSense, is the actual dashboard itself. Here we can configure routing, we can configure dynamic routing, we can configure DHCP, DHCP v4, DHCP v6, DNS, DNS relay, VPN functions if you want to do that. It's all in here. So this is the important point, and the point I wanted to make sure we could get to today. Number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename OpnSense 1 to something like OpnSense Main or something like that, because I know this is the one that's up and running and cooking. I've done this installation. I did it 12 times today alone. And why the one installation I did in front of you where the EM0 and the EM1 decided to arbitrarily change places, I don't know. It wouldn't have broken anything. I probably could have gone ahead and gone into the router itself and swapped the network cards, made the other one internal and the other one bridged. But I'd rather just keep it pretty. The bottom line is this is where we need to be. Now that we've got this machine up and configured and we have access to it within the internal network, now I can start doing some configuration. All I want to do now is show you guys a few of the screens. In fact, we're never going to go through every screen on here, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff you can do in here. All right, so first of all, so this is the dashboard. It gives you a quick idea of what you're sitting on, letting me know where my connections are, for example. Lets me know exactly what kind of services I'm running. You can see I'm running DHCP. That's about it. Routing functions. These are all pretty standard Linuxes here. System, if I want to, what's my upstream gateways or anything like that. Any default routes that are already set up, which isn't going to be much at this point. But you can see that I have a few of the routes that are currently set up. We're going to be talking a lot more about routes later. At this point in time, I just want to make sure everybody gets an idea of that there is a routing table in here, and we'll be playing with this. We'll probably do an entire episode just on static routing. Any type of settings we might want to go into. This is the pretty basic stuff, host name and little silly things like that. As much as I want it can configure this if I want to. One thing I might want to add, keep in mind that this setup one didn't quite work the way I wanted. So the first time you log into this web interface, it puts you through a wizard that pretty much sets everything up. It does a good job. Again, setting it up is just nothing more than like a home router. But boy, does it have a lot more capability than that. It's got great firewall functions built into it. So I can do, here's my NAT configuration. I can do all my access control lists here. Traffic shaping, which is actually kind of a pretty cool, like super QoS kind of thing to have. VPN functions, if I want to set up either OpenVPN or IPsec, this can be pretty nice. I can make this a VPN endpoint for incoming and outgoing VPN clients. There's a huge number of services. You can set up a captive portal so that every time somebody comes in, they have to come to your web page. A little bit crazy, but you can do all that. You can do, I don't know if I'm on the right screen for it, but we can actually do secure DNS and all kinds of stuff too. All right, but the important thing is we got to this one and we're ready for lots more episodes where we can be playing with this a lot more. Take your time with OpnSense, folks. Remember, when you're installing OpnSense, you have to install, when it gives you that first login, if you just type in root and OpnSense, it's going to do a live CD. Nothing wrong with a live CD. If you want to do it that way, go for it. But I want it installed. So that's how I had to type in installer and then the password when it asked for the login. Yeah, if you're not seeing the big blue, which if you didn't see a blue screen, you're not doing it the right way. So number one, make sure that happens. The other big mistake I made is once I got everything up and configured, I tried to get into the web interface using the WAN side, which in my network is a 172 network. And I didn't think that it had firewalls. Of course it's going to have firewalls. And I'm like, what's going on? And I just opened up a little virtual machine on the internal network side and jumped right on in, just like you saw here. Take some time with this. I'm expecting there to be problems. I certainly had a few challenges. But once it's up and running, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's got so many toys. And to think all of these tools that we're replacing, all of them, higher end routers. I mean, it's not easy to find a router that does BGP, folks. That's cheap. And I can do it with OpnSense for free. We'll eventually get to that. VPN support. Now, it's not very great VPN support. It just does IPsec and OpenVPN, but still not bad, you know. We can really have some fun with dynamic versus static routing, which is probably going to be the next thing we do. And really start bringing in multiple networks. Instead of just network one and a bridge network, next time we do this, we're going to have like network one, network two, network three. And just making sure everybody can ping to each other. That's all we're going to do at the early on. So it can actually be a lot of fun. Anyway, that is going to be enough for today. Please take some time and get OpnSense running for yourself. And then we've got till next Monday. Keep in mind, Wednesdays we're not going to be doing classes. Wednesdays are open session. So it'll be next Monday we come back. I will expect all your questions already be answered because we're going to be moving forward on that and opening up lots more routes. Eventually the goal is going to be is not only are we opening up static routes, one-hop static routes, but we're going to set up multiple routers and actually jump from router to router. So we can also do that statically as well as dynamically too. Cool stuff and really the basics of the internet that you need to see. It's a lot of fun. All right, let's see if we got any questions. I got WKRP in Cincinnati in my head. I was starting to watch it. Ty, Password Network Plus. Well done, sir. Good to see it. Andre, that's smart. Andre, Mike, you need to get computer glasses. Much more comfortable than tilting your head backwards. Andre, I have computer glasses. I just hate them. Plus, I like to do that old man, you know. All right, guys. It looks like everybody's okay. Yeah, open mic Wednesdays. Those are for sure. Vegas Brent, good to see you, man. Everybody's that easy with this? All right, well, I'm going to tell you, I'm expecting some of you guys to have VirtualBox installed. I want to see you have one or two operating systems installed. I don't care what you use. Use Ubuntu desktop if you want. Use Windows if you want. I don't care. But make sure you have something installed. And I want to see some first attempts at getting OpnSense up and running. You saw even today we had a few challenges on it. But once that's up and running, guys, it's going to be amazing what we're going to be able to do in terms of network configuration. And we're doing it all my favorite possible way, completely for free. All right, guys, I'm out the door here. I'll see you Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time for our open session. And until then, don't forget to join our Discord channel, the Total Seminars Discord channel. Absolutely great place to get in there and be talking to people. We're going to be doing a lot more. Tolowit likes my Takakis shirt. Thank you, Tolowit. I appreciate that. DQ, those were a Pippa addresses. They sure were, brother. All right, then. Guys, I am definitely out of here. I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great one wherever you might be, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.